Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Practically Pastoring Podcast. I am Andrew here with 80% of the crew as we have recovered from the epic Practically Pastoring Conference and are ready to jump into the rhythm again.
Hey, don't do ministry alone. This is Practically Pastoring.
So, fellas, how we doing?
Pretty good.
We're
Pretty
doing-
tired.
yeah.
Had some big life changes like during the conference.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, nothing like bad or anything. Just had a family member move in with us. So just been a lot of like rearranging the house and changing things around and getting ready. So other than that, pretty good. Church happened and we had a snowstorm this morning. So I went sledding like an hour ago with my kids. And we built a snowman, and it was fun. So
Frank
yeah,
and I were just complaining
good times.
because it's pretty cold here in Safety Harbor, Florida as well. It's 50 degrees this morning.
Yeah,
Man, bundle
you
up.
might have to wear socks.
Yeah, it's chilly.
Yeah.
Dell,
Hey, I just found out Black Rifle Energy, they make energy drinks now. So
it's
Yeah,
not just
It's-
coffee.
it's not just coffee. This is not sponsored, but if you want to, Black
Yeah.
Rifle, that is some good stuff. Yeah, my kid, it's funny you talk about snow because yesterday somebody asked my daughter, they're like, do you like cold weather? And they're like, yes, I like cold weather, but not so cold that it snows. So my daughter is a Southern girl all the way around.
so no, you don't like cold weather.
Right.
Layer-
Not
I
that
like
cold
an
anyways.
Excuse to wear a cardigan, but I don't want to actually have to do
Right?
anything. That's kind of how
Andrew,
I live.
all I want to see is you in an ascot. Okay, that would be incredible. I think
don't
next
own
time you go
one,
to
but
Europe and it's the fall, you need to get one.
I would look so dignified. Hey, Dell, why don't you jump in and take this first question for us?
Yeah, let's go for it. Now, I'll go ahead and throw this out here. We're also a group on Facebook. Would love it if you joined us. If you want us to get your question, a lot of times people post them anonymously, and there's reasons they post them anonymously. We're about to read one of those questions. So I got this one for us, fellas. We're going to think on this for a second. It says this probably doesn't need to be anonymous, but in case another pastor local to me or by some weird coincidence, someone from the church in question roams around these halls, here it is. A guy and his new wife left our church of less than 100 last year to go to a massive megachurch, 6,000 to 7,000 people, because of the sheer numbers of programs they have. And if I have to guess, just to blend in. We talked about it at length, and I sent them off with grace. There were some things about the situation I completely understood. He had been at our church for 50 years, and his wife grew up in her home church. He's a widower, she's a widow, and they really wanted a clean start without a life of memories of their spouses in their home churches. So they used it as a chance to both cut old ties and start fresh, and I get that, I really do. However, the pattern I'm now seeing, as they're both in their 70s, is that they go to the big church to consume things, yet whenever they're related to pastoral care come up, they lean on their home churches. I had a call from his wife yesterday that he was in the hospital, and she wondered if I could stop and visit. So that's the first visitation request I've gotten, but she called me about a half dozen other times, just keying me in on stuff that they're going through. I love the guy, and he's great legacy at our church, but visitation is starting to feel like a stretch. It'd be one thing if the hospital weren't also 45 minutes away. I know. Right now, I have enough stuff on the church's collective plate without starting to take on those sort of things. I'll most likely use this opportunity as a means of grace to gently explain my thoughts on the situation when he's a bit better. But frankly, the situation makes me feel like a pastoral side piece. Has anyone gone through that before?
Great
What are the
title.
boundaries that you use to develop? Very well worded.
What a title.
I've also been a side piece, but that's never mind.
Fuck the world.
Okay, so unnecessary. All right, I'll start then since Andrew is in the gutter. Yeah, I mean, I understand the feeling of feeling like a pastoral side piece. I've had some similar experiences here. I think maybe it's just a small church thing, but every church I've been to that was smaller, this kind of thing happened where somebody was connected to the small church, went to the big church. It happened a lot during COVID, where bigger churches were offering programming a little bit sooner than the smaller churches, and people left the smaller churches for the bigger churches. But then when they needed to like move, or somebody was in the hospital, or it begins to there's this weird blend of like friendship and church membership that the lines get kind of blurry and weird. Because yes, it's totally true that you can maintain friendships with somebody at a past church if you leave and go across town. Especially, it doesn't sound like they left in a bad way. had a meeting, left in, with grace and everything, and that's fine. But what's difficult is then you're still expecting you're still feeling entitled to the resources of the community of the old place while you're not contributing to that much. And I think for this guy, this pastor, he's feeling like the problem is I've got another 100-ish people to pastor, and this person who is not part of our community anymore and chose to leave our community, and that's fine if they want to do that. But part of what they left is all of this pastoral care and visitation, all that stuff is part of what it means to live in community with a local church, in my opinion. And so I think if I was him, I would I'd probably wait till he was out of the hospital, but I would probably have a sit down with them and just talk about boundaries and talk about, I have a limited amount of time and resources, and those are dedicated to the people of this local church. And I'm not upset at you, and I'm not mad at you, and I'm not bitter about it, but you've chosen to go to this church and you have new pastors now. And I would encourage you to connect with them or small group or some way where that care can take place. Now, I think the tricky part is that person is going to still feel free, and they should still feel free to connect with friends who are part of your church who they've had for a long time. And there's honestly nothing you can or should do about that. Friendships are good and they should maintain those. So I think the tricky part is expecting the pastoral care when they've left the congregation and are no longer you're not really their pastor anymore.
And I think this is really common. I'm sorry, Frank. You may take it. Go ahead, buddy. You were already.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, this is actually really common with these churches. I went to get my master's up in Anderson, South Carolina, and New Spring's really big up there. And I mean, they're fine. They're what you would expect with that size church. They don't really offer a whole lot in regards to pastoral care. And all my professors there were local pastors. And finally, I just asked one in class. I was like, very similar to this. I was like, what's your take on New Spring? And he got kind of quiet. And this was during the Perry Noble days, so it was a different church back then. But he told me, he said, here's my only take. He goes, Miss Betsy leaves our church and goes to New Spring because it's flashy. But when Miss Betsy's mama dies, we're the one who has to put her in the ground. And I think that's something that people need to realize. There's an exchange you give whenever you go to these churches. And I think pastoral care is often, we exchange that for what we call leadership, and pastoral care and leadership are different things. So I think helping him see that it's going to be a difficult conversation, but I think you also need to help him see this is the church you're at now. Like, if you want to participate with this fellowship, you have my blessing. We've talked about it, but this is something that you're not going to get there. And are you okay with that? It's putting a healthy boundary up, right? A boundary is simply, it's not doing anything. A boundary is simply saying, this is what we're not going to do. It's not as offensive as a lot of people think it is, but I think you put the boundary up and you say, listen, I'm called to pastor this flock. You were once part of it. It's really difficult. You're at this new church, so you need to submit to the things they offer you. And if they don't offer you pastoral care, that's a conversation you need to have.
Well, and Del, with the boundaries idea, I think kind of what you're saying is, in this situation, is it is dysfunctional for you to expect different things from these different communities, one that you're not a part of. So it's dysfunctional for you to not want pastoral care from the place you've chosen to be at. And it's also dysfunctional for you to be there consuming all the goods over there and then come back over here when you need this one specific thing that you left us. And we're just not going to participate in your dysfunction, I think, is another way to think about putting up the boundaries. I think we're saying the same thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
we're just not going to participate in the dysfunction that you're walking in right now. And we love you and we want to care about you. And if you want to be part of our community, obviously you'd be welcome back with open arms. I think a lot of times in our culture right now, that gets interpreted as pettiness or bitterness. And it's not necessarily those things. It could be, you could be operating from pettiness, but it's not necessarily pettiness for you to say it's dysfunctional for you to operate this way and expect, to be completely over at this other church and then want us to do things for you as well. That's just unfair to us. And we're just not going to participate in that with you.
To slightly push back on Delmar, I don't want to. I think the way you phrased it seems like at a certain size church they stopped doing pastoral care. I don't think maybe New Spring wasn't doing pastoral care, but I think larger churches don't necessarily.
Also, if a church grows by 5,000 people in 3 years, you don't have that mechanism in place. So like to give the big churches like that some grace. No one plans to start a church and have it kind of explode like that. So I'm sure there's better pastoral care at New Spring now than there was when Delmar was
Sure,
in seminary.
sure.
You know,
Yeah, yeah,
15,
And
20
also,
years ago.
I would just add here too. I think let me put this maybe in a different wording, because that I don't want to be unclear. I think help them understand that pastoral care looks different at their new church
It does.
than it looks at our church, because it's going to look different, and help them see that because I worked at a church where we had pastoral staff. Their only job was to go visit people in the hospitals and sit with people. So just let them understand, hey, maybe pastoral care works differently. We need to figure out how that works there. Maybe that's a better way of phrasing it.
Well, and
Yeah,
if people want the senior pastor to come visit them, that's just not going to happen when you get to a certain size, like it happens in a small church.
Unless you're a giant giver.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way to put it. It's like pastoral care will always look different from any church to any church. Like even like from Andrew's church to Jeff's church, it's gonna look probably different. But as it grows bigger, I think what you just said, what you guys have said is true. Is like it might not be the lead pastor. It's gonna be maybe a campus pastor if it's a multi-site situation, or they have like a team of care pastors or some other kind of like a deacon maybe that does his hospital visits and things like that. But I think when I read this, I think this serves this comes from a bigger problem that I think a lot of congregants today are facing when they go to church, is they treat church like consumers. Like,
Yeah.
this is the content I'm getting. And
And they want
perhaps-
both from both places. They want to get the best of both worlds is what they're trying to do.
Right. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys have faced this, but like there's these people who come to me and they'll like talk about they want to be part of my church, and then they say something they don't realize that it makes me want to stay away from them. Is they'll say stuff like, yes, I sing in the choir over here and I've served at this church over there.
Mhm.
And like they have like this like laundry list resume of like the churches that they're actively trying to be a part of at the current moment, and they want to add us to that. And I just think that's just like really, really bad ecclesiology that no one's corrected them on. Like as I'm trying to start this church, and I'm sure you guys are doing this with your churches, is like kind of cast a vision of like, if this is your church, like go all in here,
Mhm.
not just in your where you're going to sit on Sunday morning, but where you're going to have community, where you're going to serve, where you're going to give. And like the reason why we want to kind of not allow or not have you as a congregant go to multiple churches is because you'll never fully appreciate what a congregation can do for you when you commit to a congregation, and two, it's like you're not going to be really known if you're in a million different places at one time. And so like that larger church might have better preaching than the other guy. I don't know the why. I didn't
Well, like
really-
imagine that. Imagine you're like, I love the music at my new church, but could you come preach a sermon to me?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
That would be so
yeah.
weird, and that's kind of what's happening here.
Yeah, and I think like what we see is I'm convinced, and I think there's a book that came out during COVID that was by 9 marks that were like Rediscovered Church, I think it was called. But like COVID has so drastically changed our relationship with the church that we see music, the worship and sermons as content. And because we see it as content, we can bounce around like we do on our TV, on our TVs with different channels. And we've like lost the aspect of what this community is all about, where if you were in the hospital in a church that you've given yourself over to, you wouldn't have to necessarily send a request to the prayer team to make sure they can come visit you, because you're so known that they're going to know you and visit with you. And like what we're seeing here is like the wife is reaching out to the pastor of the previous church to let him in all this stuff. I mean, the fact that they've placed themselves in a position where they have to let people know what's going on already shows us that they're kind of disconnected from like the point of community. And so, like we say a million times, this feels like a discipleship issue, but I don't know if it's this pastor's job to disciple them. This is like this pastor's job to tell them, hey, go all in at the church you're at, like make them aware. Like maybe they are plugged into a small group and that's an indictment on their system over there, but like they need to like tell them on their church. Bringing them in, A, is going to do a disjustice for his own church that he's trying to care for, and B, It's doing a disjustice for these people.
I'm going to not push way back, but I think this is kind of a beautiful thing. And this pastor has the opportunity to be kingdom minded. One of the things that we say is, kingdom, not castles. And it is about the kingdom of God, not the individual castle of one church or another. This isn't the 50-year member reaching out to the pastor, but this is the pastor's new wife. I mean, I hope I don't have to figure out what it's like to have a new wife in my 70s, but she's figuring out how to be a new bride to someone who has a legacy at this church, who left that church to make her more comfortable. Because I get that if you've been at one church 50 years and she's been at one church 50 years, you want to find a place that is ours. But then when sickness happens, when there's a serious life issue, there's the church that you've been at for 2 or 3 years, or there's the church that you've probably had your parents' funerals at, the church that you've given to the Capitol campaign for 2 buildings ago or whatever it is. And so I think if this was the guy who had been a member for 50 years reaching out to the pastor saying, hey, you need to come see me, I'm doing this, this, and this, that'd be one thing. But this is his wife trying to give him comfort and peace when he's in the hospital. I'm kind of like, hey, good for her. How do you do the newlywed thing at 70 when there's kids and there's grandkids and there's a 50+ year legacy at a different church? I think she is trying to honor him in the way that he was trying to honor her by being willing to leave that church that he loves. So I get it. I certainly understand the frustration and the inconvenience factor. And I'm not saying that this is about money, but also if that's a part as well. If you're supporting another ministry, it kind of hurts to get the call. But he's not the one calling, asking you to come. This is his new wife trying to love her husband as best as she can. Sometimes when you get married and you say, till death do us part, and for better and worse and all that stuff, it starts showing up a whole lot faster than you wish it would. And she's trying to figure out how to be a spouse in that new situation. And I say good for her for reaching out to something that's going to give him comfort and a peace in a way that the big megachurch guy who probably couldn't pick him out of a lineup isn't going to do. So that's
I was going to say
my contrarian take.
No, I appreciate. I think that's really good and wise. I was going to say another aspect of this that we haven't even talked about is, the small church pastor can call the bigger church and try to find out who is the person, and maybe let's go do a visit together and just have a conversation about how we can serve this family together to be kingdom minded. Now, maybe that won't work, maybe it will work. I don't know, but you have that option as the pastor who's getting reached out to, because the reality is the bigger church may not even have an idea. If he's newer there and not as connected, they may not even know he's in the hospital. And like you said, Andrew, the wife is just maybe doing her best and doesn't know who to call at the new church. And so she knows she could call the old church and get somebody. So maybe you could take the initiative and be like, hey, what church are you at? I'll take the time to call them. We'll find out who, would be in charge of that. And maybe we can meet at the hospital and just go do a visit together. And that can be a way of kind of handing off some of that as well, and making sure that because the big thing is making sure that this guy is cared for.
I think statistically speaking, at some point in the next 10 years, based on this guy's age, there's going to be a funeral. And you have to assume there's,
100%.
Again, kids and grandkids and everything else involved in this story. That funeral is not going to be in the side room chapel at the megachurch down the street. That at the end of his story, there's going to be a parenthetical statement or maybe a chapter about his faith that takes place at that church. But the story of this guy's faith and the legacy of his family's faith is taking place in your church. And so by showing up and being there, even if it's inconvenient, and even if, man, I wish this guy was back in his small group with our, men's group on Saturday mornings or whatever it was. I wish that's what it was. He spent 50 years there.
I would hope the funeral, in your picture, the funeral's at the old church of 50 people, and maybe there's a dozen people from the new church who come and
maybe the worship leader from the church down the street shows up with an acoustic guitar and makes it that much better. But the story of this guy's faith is not the parenthetical statement at the end of his life or the last chapter. It is a 50-year story of faithfulness to this church. And then, when you're in your 70s, you're not going to leave your father and mother and cleave to your wife, but you might leave the church you've been at for 50 years so that your wife will be more comfortable in a church that is both of yours instead of one that's just hers or just yours. And that's okay too.
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it, Del.
You're talking very specific, and I think that's important in this conversation.
This is not a full of old people.
Yeah, this is not a. Well, that's where your perspective brings a lot of light into this, because this isn't a 35-year-old leaving your church who's there 5 years, even 10 years. So the chances are this pastor writing in on this, he may be preaching this man's funeral one day. So you're by proximity. If he's in the hospital now, you're going to be around his family more. I personally consider that an honor when you get called in, when somebody is not because, you need to be needed, but it's like there's some trust there that you've built. If they're calling you, especially with this wife, that means she already trusts you in a way that she doesn't, that the other church hasn't got yet. Because you and I both know when the congregate first starts coming to your church, it takes time to build that mutual trust between the new church and the old pastor. So I wouldn't just throw in the towel and say, that the new church doesn't work. They're still forming that relationship of trust. But that being said, I would still take the measures, and this might be your last pastoral duty to them, to say, let's call your new church and find out how pastoral care works. You need to be cared for. Chances are they have some really good systems in place. And if they don't, well, that's a different conversation. But the word that comes to my mind is overfunctioning. And how many times do we tell each other we shouldn't overfunction for dysfunction? So I think this is one of the things. Maybe it's not dysfunction. It's just a lack of information. It very well could be.
Jeff, why don't you tell us about church merch and how we can partner?
If there's one thing that all churches need, small church, big church, new church, old church, it's merch. Everybody likes to have good merch. Everybody likes to have comfortable stuff, great gifts for first-time guests, any of that kind of stuff, things that people will actually want to wear. I'm wearing a church merch shirt right now. Printed by them, really comfortable, great stuff, fits great, all that. So if that's you, if you want that for your church, you can go to promotionsguy.com/church merch. And a lot of us overpay for merch that ends up kind of just feeling like an afterthought. It feels cheap. It's no good. And this is one of those like low-hanging fruits where it's easy to get something really well made. You can get some on-brand merch without a bunch of headaches. So again, you can go to promotionsguy.com/church merch. Thanks to Church Merch for being part of the podcast and for coming through with so many great things at the conference.
Frank, you have a very interesting story for us. And based on one of the conversations we had a few weeks ago, I'm a little bit afraid of how this is going to go. So go for it.
Yeah. So I saw an article, a tweet from Protestia. Is that how you say it? I've never said that word out loud. We've all seen the post by them. The account. But
is it I always thought it was like Protesty, like Protestant.
Maybe Protestia. I don't know. All I know is they put out almost as salacious stuff as Julie Royce. But this one, the more I read this article, the more my jaw drops. So I'm gonna I instead of reading the whole, I'm not going to read the whole article, but I'm going to give you a summary of what ChatGPT kind of summarized it, and I want to talk about this. So there's a pastor of a very large church in Indiana who is feeling the fallout because his son was arrested for having like really, really disgusting. I don't want to get this video taken down. Inappropriate videos of minors on his phone. Okay, so this son of this pastor got arrested for that. But as I don't know if it was the FBI or some government agency, as they were going through their phone, they discovered 50 private sexual videos of his parents, the pastor and his wife. And so apparently the pastor and his wife filmed sexual videos of themselves in the act, and somehow the son got the videos on his phone, that's already super gross and
heinous
and weird, super heinous. The pastor defended himself and said that these videos were created within the confines of marriage, and they were password protected videos. They were
not a very good password,
and they
weren't done at the office.
The pastor acknowledged that while marital intimacy is not sinful, some may view this decision of recording it as unwise. All right. this
And the church is now
this
like in rapid
Yup.
decline.
Unwise.
So it's been kind of going a little haywire because there's been some additional concerns. He's apparently been like one of those pastors that make inappropriate sexual jokes about his wife on the stage during a sermon.
Oh, he's the smoking hot wife guy.
That those kind of stuff.
Yep.
There is a really convoluted and complicated thing in the article where it talks about a teen couple who got pregnant and they were engaged. So a 17-year-old girl, 19-year-old boy who was engaged to get married because she got pregnant. In premarital counseling, he was asking unnecessarily overtly sexual questions that had nothing to do with premarital counseling to them. And there's also reports that this church has tried to cover it up, this conversation up anyways. So it says more than 100 members have already left this church and 2 pastors have departed because of this issue. I just went over to the church's like Facebook and Instagram. Comments are all like blocked. And
I was looking, I was like, that's a great looking website. Man, that was so pretty. And then Frank's like, yeah, this is that church. Like, oh no.
Yeah. So there's a couple questions here. There's the obvious and most uncomfortable one. What do you guys think about a pastor filming sex tapes with
Nope.
his wife?
Nope.
Crazy. Like what?
Never. I don't want a camera anywhere near me. Not in the same room. What are we doing? Bro, why? Like nobody can. You can't give me a reason that would overcome how stupid it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like it's just, why?
If what's crazy is if you were to go to the actual Twitter post from Protestia, the comments are all like, "What a man does with his wife behind closed doors is none of anyone's business."
It's all the Theo bros.
It's all that stuff.
Yeah, but it's not behind closed doors because you stuck a camera in there and didn't password protect it.
They would argue that like, who cares if it was recorded? It's for their own thing, and it's like, there's so many like. I mean, this kind of goes back to the Office thing where I'm like, I don't know a way.
You can leave the blinds open too, but they're also stupid.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between unwise and sinful. And so
yes.
So where does this fall?
Fair.
I think
unwise.
This falls
Unwise.
on the unwise, but there's obviously other issues happening at this church. Listen, I worked for Ed Young. I get the shock.
Speaking of issues,
preacher. I understand that culture, and I'm also so grateful that I think as a church society we've kind of moved on past that. I kind of compare it to the
somebody tell
early
Ed
seasons of American Idol. Yes, well, I mean Mark Driscoll's still out there being Mark Driscoll as well. There's still the outliers, but in general, as a culture, I think we've.
Like the early seasons of The Office.
I was saying like the early seasons of American Idol where Simon Cowell was a jerk and that's what made the show fun.
Oh, sure.
And now if you watch American Idol, it's like Lionel Richie is this father figure to everybody and you just want to hug him. So like in general, I think we've been less brash as a church culture, which is a good thing. But then there's always going to be this shock jock type that appeals to a specific demographic. But you know, I hate the adage, what you win people with is what you win people to. But if there are people that would not step foot into Safety Harbor Community Church that think that this guy is awesome. And if they are going to be grown and discipled, some are of Paul, some are of Apollos, and some are just Apolling. Heyo. And I don't think that this is like a disqualifying thing for ministry. I think this is take a long look in the mirror, not into
or in the camera
lens. Yeah, don't do that. I'm sure there's plenty of that already, but I think this is unwise, and it might be time for him to find some older, wiser pastors that he can be friends with that can smack him around a little bit.
I would leave this church. I would, if I was a member, I'm gone.
I would have a really hard time worshiping there.
So the Twitter account actually asked this question: would you leave a church if you discovered your pastor and his wife were regularly making sex tapes of themselves for their own private use? And it says 60% said yes. That's too low.
But that's
that needs to be in the 90s. What are we doing?
There are people that are not going to be reached by my church that think that he's awesome.
Sure. Delmar, what you got?
Yeah, well, my wife and I had a pretty good conversation about this actually, and she.
I thought I was gonna go
Frank
somewhere else.
just grabbed
That
me
Confession
almost took
time.
a crazy left turn, dude.
Frank was like,
Confession
oh my goodness.
time.
Hit the
No.
pause button. Hit the pause button.
Well-
Mute him.
It's easy for me to think about this as like the pastor and taking the break and stuff. My wife was very clear. She's like, if something like that was to ever happen, we would move out of this town to somewhere where we are not known, and you would have to work in some place where your name never came up in the headlines.
Congratulations,
again.
Dale. You're a
That's what she
farmer.
Right. But yeah, I think that's
But
part
it
of the
can never happen if you don't bring a camera anywhere near you. See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It just, there are some things that are just like, why are you taking this risk? Because it was always
Sure.
a risk that the videos would get found.
The recovering fundamentalist in me says, well, that's true about everything. You know, whatever your stance on alcohol is, guess what? If you never take a sip, you can never become an alcoholic. Whatever, you know.
And you're right. That's true.
There's legalism in there at some point, but again, this is a wisdom piece more than anything. And if you're going to pastor, there are certain Christian liberties that you are giving up for the sake of your ministry. And if you are pursuing those things at the expense of your ministry, then yikes. But this family's got enough other stuff going on that this guy should probably be taking a step
The only
away.
problem with that metaphor, though, Andrew, is that being drunk is a sin. Having too much sex with your wife is not. So this is
No. And I
squarely
would
in
say-
the unwise
and-
category.
Yes, very, very true.
Yeah, we agree.
But-
Like, someone discovering liquor in my house is more of a potential sinful thing than this, I think, because there's no way that, like, sex within the confines of marriage ends up being sinful. I mean, I guess they're, you know, if you're hurting each other or abuse or whatever, but that's not what we're talking about. But you see what I'm saying? So, like, this is totally in the realm of unwise. Like, if this gets discovered, it's going to ruin me, not because of anything sinful, but because of how embarrassing it is. Like, how devastating. I mean, his poor wife.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like that's her identity now. Married, she's the pastor's wife of the pastor who recorded them. Even if she recorded it, that's not how everyone's
Yeah.
going to think of it.
She's also the mother of a pedophile. So there's that.
Yeah.
I mean,
That she probably doesn't. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's bigger family issues here that would cause me to step away from ministry, and I think that would cause my elders to step in and say, "Hey, we love you. We're going to support you. You're not touching a microphone for at least a year."
And this is where I think you can go in and out of seasons of being qualified and unqualified for being an elder or a pastor in a church. This is where the idea of being ordained for a lifetime, I just disagree with it. I think it's possible for you to have a season of your life where you are not qualified for ministry, not because of sin. Like, it's possible that you could
But
go
because
in and out of
chaos and dysfunction.
yeah, and you could need to be disqualified for a while, like, and then the other part of it is, like, we're always hunting for this, like, this person needs to make sure they come back into ministry. Your calling is not necessarily a lifetime calling, and the four of us may disagree on that. I don't believe that the call into pastoral ministry is necessarily a lifetime call, where if you have to step down from something, you always have to find your way back into pastoral ministry, or else, like, something is taken from you. Your identity is not that. I think that's how you serve the church in that particular season. And for some of us, that season does last our whole life. And for some of us, it doesn't. But I think, like, in this guy's case, it's like you may need to take a break and come back to ministry, or you may need to just not be in ministry anymore for the sake of your family, because that is your first ministry.
the kid with the gross porn stuff is tragic, and like it's already like I can't imagine like what that would do to a family. This, I mean, it's just like I think Delmar's wife is onto something about like going to South Dakota and becoming a farmhand or something. But there's some more allegations and stuff brought up here that was interesting. That I just want to, with the time that we have, to like talk about. We talked about the kind of inappropriate humor that was of a certain era in preaching when it comes to like certain kind of men and sex and smoking hot wife and stuff like that. That he apparently was like overly sexual or making jokes like that. But he also had a lot of like inappropriate, at least it seems like inappropriate sexual questions. Like I said, there was this one couple that's been reported here where the engaged woman was 17, so she was a minor, and there was very explicit questions about like things they did and didn't do and things that they used in their sexual activity. It's pretty obscene and perverted. things I don't think I've ever asked when I have premarital counseling
Yeah.
with people. My question to you is, you talk about, was it chapter 7 in the
Yes, the Getting Ready for Marriage book.
There's a book called Getting Ready for Marriage, where chapter 7 is the sex chapter. I think in all of our premarital counseling time, there is going to be a conversation about sex, but like, to what degree and how do you kind of approach that conversation where you're not asking inappropriate stuff or unnecessary stuff? Like, what is the aim, I guess, when you start talking about that stuff in your conversation?
Well, not for fetish sake is what this other guy came across. If you read the way, I don't even want to get into it on here, but there's a way that he's questioning them in such a way that seems like more of a curiosity than for their holiness. I think you definitely take the holiness approach, and you need to put guardrails up when you're having that conversation. You know, like, this is why we're doing this, because this is God's intention for marriage. Pull scripture into that conversation instead of just asking these questions, because he doesn't need to know about where they are emotionally and physically during the act, which is what he's asking here. So what you really need to do is explain to them what it is, why it was created. I would lay that as the foundation and then build from that. But details like that, you don't need. Obviously, the girl was pregnant, right? So you don't need detail.
Because we are in the Worship Center at Safety Harbor Community Church and we're surrounded by glass, we see weird stuff. Like the preschool classes walked by. We just saw a St. Patrick's Day golf cart. It's not St. Patrick's Day for another couple of weeks.
Amazing.
We just saw multiple leprechauns drive past us in a golf cart, and the golf cart is fully decked out as a leprechaun.
Wow.
With balloons and,
Anyways.
That was weird.
Mark, I think you may have some good points. It's like the point of it is to
holiness
and like how we are to God's view of sex. But man,
I've had weird questions in premarital counseling where it's like, hey, is this okay? Or like a married couple be like, hey, pastor, we want to talk to you. Anytime someone calls me pastor instead of Andrew, I get a little bit nervous because like,
what's coming?
But I've had like weird questions like, is this okay or is this not? And so like that again makes me blush. But I have never brought up any subject like that in premarital counseling because I
just ask, hey guys, do you have any questions?
Hold up. So y'all never never ask them if they are, being unholy. Okay. I'm about to say, sure. Okay, good.
But we don't get into the
details,
ways that it happens. We don't get into any mechanics. Now, I will say this. I have asked the question, do you guys have any questions? And the guy said, actually, yes, I do. Can I ask you about, and he asked me a question that somebody who's never had sex before would want to ask about how things work. And I could tell that his fiance was uncomfortable. So I set up a meeting between just him and I told her, hey, we're going to have a conversation about this. I want you to know that we're not going to get into anything that he's not comfortable getting into. I'm just going to simply answer his questions. Are you okay with us meeting? Because, it's weird because for her, she's like, I'm the subject of this conversation, kind of, and he's asking me like, he basically was asking me, how do I care for her? And so that was just a conversation that he and I had over coffee at like a couple days later.
Are you free for coffee this week to meet with me?
It's tricky. No, you have a lot of answers.
One thing I actually do bring up in the premarital counseling is I preemptively say this because people will lie to you in premarital counseling.
Oh,
You're saying like they'll gladly lie
really,
and especially in this area, they like don't want to admit certain things. They might not even be willing to admit stuff to their fiance. But I'll like preemptively say this. And when we have this session, this conversation, is porn will cause more destruction to your marriage than you realize. Your previous sexual partners and any pornography you've seen may have given you an idea of what sex is that actually is unholy and demeaning to your spouse. And so I even say, like, if pornography has been a part of your story, and I say that kind of like open-ended, where I'm privately assuming that like there probably is an aspect where pornography has been a part of the story, I highly encourage them to detangle and unravel that, and don't allow any kind of like fetishes or things that they saw in pornography influence their sexual intimacy, because what might have become normative from their porn use is actually very destructive in the wedding bed. And so I actually will say that preemptively, like, hey, there might be some things you need to deconstruct. And I would highly encourage you to like have these conversations, because you might be entering into something thinking I'm going to have my fantasies fulfilled, and it's going to be destructive to your relationship.
One of the
which might be
the alarm going off in
this.
my head this whole time the story's been brought up, and I don't know any of these people. I don't want to accuse anybody, but from the very brash joker type of personality who's always bringing up these types of jokes, there's usually there's a reason it's always on the back of their mind. And the proclivity to I'm going to turn on the iPhone, or I'm going to bring whatever, is probably not something that just happened. And so and again, I don't know this person. I'm not accusing them. I knew a guy in Texas who had a very odd ministry. This was like when everybody was getting Wi-Fi for the very first time. And so we were seeing, underage pornography use spike. He came and did a presentation at the church I was working at, and it was the weirdest thing ever. He talked about how he would spend, 3 months a year trying to find all the new trends and, what kids were using their PlayStation Portable to, for these things. So he would try to, find everything he could. And part of his ministry was that he was, the one finding all of this stuff so that parents wouldn't have to, kind of thing.
The inside scoop.
Are you about to say the same thing? I know. Is this about a person in Arkansas?
No.
Okay, when you're done, I want to share something.
But it might be the same person, because Texas and Arkansas are pretty much cousins. But his name was, I'm not going to say his name. But his ministry was like a play on his last name.
Okay.
But so he would be like, hey, if this is something that you've struggled with, maybe the best option for you is for you to make your own videos. And I remember my wife and I looking at each other.
Whoa.
Like, that is not good advice.
And this guy is a graduate of his program, I guess.
Yeah. So I have heard Christian ministries say, like, if you need video stimulation, or if
you don't,
or if you and your spouse are going to be separated for a couple of months because of a deployment, maybe this is an option for you. And I just remember looking at my wife saying, I don't know that we should have the parents of our middle school students in this room right now, because I feel very uncomfortable. I just brought this guy in.
There was a person I knew that was very similar to that, where they would like sign up for everything and get on everything so they can like know and be able to talk to parents. And when the Ashley Madison stuff came out, he like told me, he's like, hey, you're gonna find my name in the leak. It's not that I was cheating my wife. My wife and my church knew about it. I just wanted to be on it so I can know.
So you can know how it works. So look for the signs.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if I need to get on
Bro.
on an adult dating website to. Anyways, that was a crazy story. I actually believe him, but like I was like, that was crazy.
But that's also like, do you know what? I'm going to eat 6,000 calories a day so that I can help other people know what to look out for.
Right.
Like I'm going to consume all of this deep fried filth.
We have a book in the Bible like this.
I know. It's like,
we don't need to do this.
This is guys, stop me if you've heard this, but this is a discipleship issue.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And going back to that, my good friend Jeff, a few weeks ago on this very podcast, said, hey, pastors, you need to be discipled by your people as much as you need to be discipling your people. And this whole story is the story of a pastor who really needs to be discipled by some older and wiser people in his church.
Yeah, he does.
So,
yeah,
listen, these are two
very
different
he needs some older he needs some older, wiser people in his church to support him and his family right now too.
Absolutely.
That's what he needs.
Absolutely, he does. Listen, this is going to be out whenever and wherever you get your podcast. We hope these conversations were helpful for you today. We would love for you to become a member of our Facebook group so that when something crazy happens at your church, you can anonymously post it and we can talk about it. That would be wonderful. But also, it's a great place to find camaraderie in ministry and to ask questions for real practical tips, because this is, after all, practically pastoring. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking out Church Merch, our favorite ministry partner. And we will hear from you guys, or you'll hear from us next week. Bye, y'all.
See ya.